sheriff did not show up to cost
Right,
him
right.
his reelection. I'm still pretty convinced about that.
Well, and that was an election that was decided by, what, less than 200 votes,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you would think that you would want to take advantage of every opportunity to persuade every eligible voter out there. And look, there are more than 500,000 Republican votes that exist here just in the upstate of South Carolina, and you would think that you couldn't avoid those. Yancy, how are you? Good to see you, sir. Yancy McGill, one of our debaters tonight, joining us. Catherine Templeton being introduced in the background as well. Lieutenant Governor Kevin Bryant, introduced a few moments ago. And John Warren being introduced as well. Presley's going to take care of some of the housekeeping, and then we'll be getting underway here at 7.
Here comes Henry McMaster. Here we go. Well, reasonably good facsimile of him.
Yes, indeed.
He's putting a likeness of the governor up there so we can all remember who is not here. If he would like to join us, he still could, and he is most certainly welcome to occupy that chair there in the middle.
We'll be back, and we'll begin the debate coming up next here on 106.3 WORD.
Attention Carolina residents, if you thought about switching to solar power with a 30% federal tax credit and South Carolina residents receiving an additional
We've got some seats over here to my right. There's a couple seats over here. All right. Again, please remember when we go live on air, they're going to give me the cue. We're going to welcome everybody, and when I welcome everybody, if you would just give us a big round of applause and a big cheer. And then I'm going to introduce Bob and Tara. We're going to say a few words, and then we're going to turn it over to them. And we are going to go nonstop from 7:05 till 8:30, nonstop questioning with the candidates. And what? Yeah, if you could help us, when you start to clap and cheer and whoop and holler, it just kills airtime, and we're trying to get as many questions in as we can. So if you would, we would prefer you not to clap and hoop and holler, if you would, and let us get through with these questions. Mark,
How's that traffic?
okay.
You are willing to come out here, mill around with the citizens, with the regular people, get to know them, and answer our questions. We really appreciate you taking the time to do that this evening.
And you'll be able to hear Tara's tirade tomorrow morning, starting at 6 a.m. until 10, right?
Well, I don't get good and fire enough to do the tirade till about 6:30.
Oh, 6:30, okay. All
She's
right.
a bulldog.
And Bob's on from 3 till 7 p.m. In the afternoons. Okay, we've got just about, 3 minutes, Mark? 5 minutes? We still have 5 minutes.
4.
Okay, well, we're good then.
About 4.
4? Okay, all right. Well, we're just going to stand by and twiddle our thumbs. I'd like to be done and ready when this starts rather than not being finished. Okay?
And if I can add one other thing, that is that as the electoral process proceeds along and you folks continue wearing out shoe leather and beating the street and trying to round up votes, there is a possibility, and I know that you folks all hope that it comes to fruition, that there might be a runoff following the June 12th primary. And Presley, you may want to tell them about our plans for that as well.
Yes, so we do have plans for a runoff debate for the 4th Congressional District. We have 13 candidates. You're one of 5. We have 13 who are running for Trey Gotti's seat. And we're most definitely going to have a runoff there. And so we are going to come back on June the 4th, which is a Monday night, about 3 weeks from tonight. There's a poll going to be done, and that poll will determine the top 4 or 5 candidates for the congressional runoff seat. We haven't asked you all to come all the way back here for a runoff debate, but if you'd like to do one, we'll talk about it afterwards and maybe get one squeezed in before June the 25th.
It'll be one of us and an empty chair.
Okay, one of you in an empty chair, okay.
Yeah, sadly, that may be correct. It would be fascinating to see if we do have a runoff debate.
Well, if it's only one of them in an empty chair, we won't have a debate.
Yeah, that's true.
So on June the 4th, we will have the 4th Congressional candidate runoff, and then we will, the whittled down debate, then we will have on, I think it's June the 25th, which is the night before the election, we will have one last 4th Congressional District debate. Okay, what are we at, 2 minutes?
Yes.
2 minutes, okay. Okay.
It's amazing how slowly 2 minutes can go by, isn't it?
Yeah. And when I give you the cue like this, is when you all have to start cheering and whooping and hollering. It's the only time we're going to allow it tonight, okay? And, well, at the end, when everybody is finished, we'll have one last chance for applause, okay? Yes, if you haven't signed in, we've got sign in. If you want more information from the Greenville Tea Party, give us your name, email address, and phone number, and we will add you to our mailing list, our email list. You can find us on Facebook at Greenville Tea Party. Of course, WORD, you know where to find them, WORD.com. And any other last minute announcement is 1063WORD.com. Okay, so we're about 2 minutes away.
Throw it to you for that? Yeah. Okay.
Robert, you want to go ahead and key up the music, or? Uh-oh, did we lose something?
They putting off that kitchen or bathroom remodel. How about a deck?
Oh, I was just jelly
Financial, the company can be tough.
Yeah.
I'm Jamie
Yeah.
Walker, my home
Right,
repair
and you can't hear 'em.
has been rated best in upstate for 4 years in a row. Let my license
Yeah, we're about to come out.
your bathroom, kitchen, deck, or something.
Yeah, we've got the open coming.
Lifetime workmanship warranty. For your dream remodel or addition, call Becker Home Repairs at 416-1620. Schedule online at beckerhomerepairs.com.
Now, on 106.3 WORD News Special. Live from Zen in downtown Greenville, the Greenville...
Please clap. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. We got a few hundred people here tonight at Zen, downtown Greenville. Yeah, I'm Presley Stutz. I'm the chairman of the Greenville Tea Party, and we welcome everybody live. We welcome everybody on WORD Radio, and we welcome everybody live on our Greenville Tea Party Facebook stream. It's a great hot evening out there tonight, and the political races are heating up. And tonight we have our South Carolina gubernatorial debate, and we have Lieutenant Governor Kevin Bryant. We've got Yancey McGill. And for those of you who cannot see by radio, we do have a cardboard cutout of our illustrious governor. Henry McMaster is here in effigy only. Catherine Templeton. And John Warren. And our illustrious moderators for tonight's debate are Bob McLean and Tara Savacious. And let's give them a round of applause. And we're going to turn this over to them. Thank you.
Good evening. Well, we'll get started quickly here. So you know what's going on. Each candidate's going to be given a 60-second opening statement. And then the questions will come in random order, but each will be given an equal number of questions. And each will have 60 seconds for a response, and 30 seconds will be allowed for any clarification or rebuttal response if another individual's name is mentioned. So if your name is mentioned, then you get to respond to what that candidate has said about you. And the goal is to get to 20 questions. And some of the questions will be for all four candidates, and some questions will be specific to that individual candidate. So wishing you the best of luck this evening.
And let's go ahead and begin with the general questions for each of the candidates individually, which you, as Tara pointed out, will have 1 minute to answer. And we'll begin on the far end with Lieutenant Governor Kevin Bryant. South Carolina obviously faces some pretty big problems in 2018 and the years ahead. In your opinion, and this is for all the candidates, and we'll give you an opportunity to answer individually, in your opinion, what are the three biggest problems that are facing the Palmetto State, and how, as governor, would you deal with them? And here's Lieutenant Governor Kevin Bryant.
Thank you so much for the question, Bobby. Thank you, Presley. Thank you, Tea Party. And I thank each and every one of you for being here. I'm Kevin Bryant, and I'm a candidate for governor. And to answer your question, Bobby, the biggest problem we have in South Carolina is corruption. We have the godfather, Richard Quinn, who is the center of this ongoing political corruption probe. And we have a picture that I brought for you to see. The first order of business was have the godfather and a family meeting in the governor's mansion. The trough dwellers, the tax collectors, the special interests run your government. And it does not reflect the integrity of South Carolina. It is time to restore integrity in your government and return your government to you, the taxpayer. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin Bryant. Yancey McGill.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much for allowing us to be here tonight. I would say the corruption is one of the three. Protection of our AA credit rating, AAA credit rating. We will lose our credit rating if we continue down the path that we're going. We've had it for years. One time it slipped, but we have got to protect and simply not spend money we do not have. The corruption, the number one issue, is without a question. There are a lot of people I feel will go to jail. Hear it in this forum tonight. I can tell you things don't just happen. When you have excess money, it's a rigged system, and that system is hard to go through that maze. It's hard for Senate and House members to go through that maze, being brand new. But I will tell you this, that audits, and if necessary, forensic audits, will have to be applied to disclose the money that is in state government.
Thank you, Mr. McGill. Your time has expired. And next is Catherine Templeton.
Thank you. I agree. Corruption is the number one problem, and until the politicians stop sticking their hands in our pockets and putting money in theirs, we're not going to fix any of the issues that we have in South Carolina. You know, when I'm your governor, we're going to make sure that we have money for the roads in our schools, but right now there's so much self-dealing in Columbia that we can't fix our roads, and we can't seem to educate our children to get them ready for our jobs. When I'm your governor, I'm going to take a buzzsaw to all of that corruption and make sure we have term limits. Make sure that when people are in Columbia and they are there to serve us, that they can't take our money for state contracts for themselves, that they can't appoint their sons and daughters and cousins to the state boards and commissions, and that they're actually subject to the Freedom of Information Act, and that the people's business is done in the sunshine. You know, this is my issue because I have turned in the Quins for corrupt state contracts when I worked for Governor Haley, and I would do it again.
Thank you, Catherine Templeton. John Warren.
Thank you. I'm John Warren. I'm a businessman, a conservative, and a Marine. And who I am not is a career politician, a government insider, or a lawyer. And the number one problem that we have in all of South Carolina is people do not value taxpayer dollars, and that means accountability. We have problems with Santee Cooper. We've lost $4 billion with Santee Cooper. Why? Because there's no accountability with the board. We have problems with education. We're 50th in education, but we spend $13,000 per year per student. Less than half of that actually goes to the classroom. Again, accountability. With our roads, we have no accountability with DOT. We need to roll back the DOT Commission and the State Infrastructure Bank. With our taxes, there's no accountability, and it penalizes small business. We have to have a true conservative outsider to fight for the taxpayer, someone that's been successful in the private sector, someone that's created hundreds of jobs, and that's what I'm going to do as governor.
Thank you, John Warren. We inadvertently skipped over the opening introductory statement, 60 seconds. So we're going to start with you, John Warren. You did a little bit of that a minute ago.
So again, I'm John Warren. I am a businessman, a conservative, and a Marine. And why I'm running to fight for all of you in this room. I'm running to fight for all of the taxpayers listening. We need someone that's going to go down to Columbia and fight for all of us, because it's not happening right now. We live in the greatest state in the entire country. And what makes us so great are our people. Our people are God-fearing, they're honest, they're hardworking, and they're conservative. And when you look at what comes out of Columbia, it is the opposite of our great people and our great state. And what I want to do, I want to fight for all of you. I want to bring accountability to government. I want to solve problems. I want to create jobs. I'm the only one running that's created hundreds of jobs, who's managed a P&L statement, who signs the front of a check rather than the back of a check. And that's why I'm running. Thank you.
Thank you, John Warren. You're listening to the gubernatorial debate on 106.3 WORD, sponsored by the Greenville Tea Party and 106.3 WORD. Catherine Templeton.
Thank you. I'm Catherine Templeton. And where I come from, we show up when people need help. I'm one of the first people Governor Haley asked to help her make it a great day in South Carolina. I can't unsee what I saw in Columbia, but I can undo it. I'm a conservative outsider who's never run for office, but I did stand with Governor Haley for 4 years while we fought the entrenched bureaucrats, the corrupt good old boys, and the liberal Democrats. In fact, I now know just enough about how they waste our money and self-deal to be dangerous to the snakes in the swamp. The liberal media was so upset that with my government reform, they called me a buzzsaw, and I earned it. We fired over 100 entrenched bureaucrats, saved $68 million in taxpayer dollars. We went 3 for 3 against the Obama administration, and we actually brought 7,500 Boeing jobs to South Carolina families. Maybe that's why President Trump's team called me a triple threat when he interviewed me to be Secretary of Labor. We need to make it a great day in South Carolina again.
Thank you, Catherine Templeton. Yancey McGill.
Thank you very much. I would just like to let everyone know in this room, the 3 people that are seated here tonight, I can tell you and attest to you, are well qualified to be governor of this state. We have met all over the state. We've been in a lot of forums, but I can assure you all the other 3, myself included, are well qualified. I talked a while ago about forensic audits. I talked a while ago about some of the issues dealing with the credit rating. I'm here to tell you now, this state is awash in money. We have got to disclose to the public where those funds are and quit telling the public that South Carolina does not have any money. This state is loaded. DOT is loaded. Not everybody can go in and get projects. I saw a very nice project coming up here today, Bob, coming in to Greenville. But you earned it. Nobody's giving you anything. That's your tax money. Greenville wrote the book on economic development. It's done.
Thank you, Yancey McGill and Kevin Bryant.
Thank you, Tara. I'm Kevin Bryant. I'm your lieutenant governor, and I would love to be your governor. I have 3 distinctives. I'm a business owner. We've grown a corner drugstore with 5 employees to 34 over the last couple of years. I'm a healthcare provider. I'm a pharmacist. So Bobby and Tara, you have a politician and a drug dealer on your show this evening. Also, I have a record. I'm a conservative activist just like you. I've licked stamps. I've knocked on doors. I've gone door to door and made phone calls for candidates, and you know what? I've been burned by Republicans saying all the things that we want to hear, then they get elected, then they go start holding hands with Democrats and raising your taxes. I have a record I can point to, a very conservative record for your tax dollars, and I summarize it very simply: promoting your liberty and protecting your wallet. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen and lady. Proceeding along, South Carolina is somewhat unique in the structure of our state constitution that goes a long way towards hamstringing the ability of the governor to get a lot of things done. The governor in South Carolina does not have the authority that governors in many of the other states do to make a lot of the changes that people believe are truly needed in state government. As the old saying goes, talk is cheap. So the question is, what specifically would your plan be to get your agenda accomplished? And let's begin with John Warren.
So it's a great question. One of the things that I'm often asked is, I love your agenda, how are you going to accomplish it? And what sets me apart up here among my private sector accomplishments, I have a plan to accomplish my agenda, and it starts with targeting every state rep and every state senator like Hugh Leatherman, who systematically betray us every time, who betrayed the Republican platform. I'm going to find quality candidates to run against them. I'm going to help them get financing, and I'm going to campaign with them. And by doing that, we can change the entire makeup of the legislature. That is how you get something done. And once you get something done with the legislature, the first thing that needs to happen are term limits. Term limits would solve corruption. Term limits would also get a higher caliber person willing to run because they only have to go down there for six years and can get something accomplished. So I would target the legislature who betray us constantly.
John Warren, thank you very much. Next, Catherine Templeton.
Thank you, Bob. The Constitution is the problem, and I would change the Constitution. In order to do that, we give the power back to the people to vote. What are some of the biggest issues in South Carolina? Education, we're 50th. And our roads, can we all agree that our roads are crumbling under our feet? Guess who's not in charge of education and our roads in South Carolina? The governor. We need to put a constitutional referendum on the ballot so the people of South Carolina can hold somebody accountable. We need to put the full weight of the governor's office behind our education system. And fixing roads, that's not difficult. It's an easy problem, but with all of this corruption and all of this politics, it's not a simple solution. So we have to give the people the power back. We have to let the people hold the governor accountable. And, you know, they call me the buzzsaw because I actually did get things done with our legislature when I served you for 4 years and when I worked for Governor Haley. And like our president, while I'm getting hit by the liberals, it's still working when we drain the swamp.
Thank you, Ms. Templeton. And next up is Yancey McGill, former Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you, Bob. I would very quickly state that everything that is being said is on target. The biggest issue that an executive has in this state, can you put the votes together in the Senate and the House, 170, to achieve what you need to do? I can submit to you tonight that all of us are familiar with the legislative process, but in order to pass solid reform, disclosure, and to be able to let you know where your money is located, we don't need to grow the governor's office. We need to grow the citizens' input and the citizens' control over what is going on. I will simply state to you that I found the clock. Here it is right here. what it boils down to is this. You put the votes together, you can accomplish anything that you need to do. If you do not have the votes with the executive branch, you'll fail every time.
Yancey McGill, thank you, sir, and Lieutenant Governor Kevin Bryant.
Thank you, Bobby. The key is to bring the message to the taxpayer.
That's right.
The key is to get outside of the Columbia bubble, outside of the special interests and the lobbyists and the trough dwellers, and come to you, the taxpayer. We are known nationally as the legislative state. We have the strongest legislature and the weakest executive branch. Prime example is the Department of Transportation. You don't know who to hold accountable. Like it's been said earlier, it needs to be a cabinet agency under the office of governor so you know who to hold accountable. And that message should have been brought to you, the taxpayer, during the gas tax debate, instead of what we saw, a veto hidden under a bushel and overridden the same day. Then it was like Obamacare. Let's pass it and then let the taxpayer find out what's in it. That is a lack of leadership. You got to show up, you got to get outside of Columbia and come communicate the message to the taxpayer, and then you'll get victories in the legislature.
Thank you, Kevin Bryant. Let's jump on to our next question, already mentioned by John Warren. South Carolina is ranked 50th in education, or near to it, depending on the survey. Dead last or almost dead last in the nation. Two things. Why? Why is this? And secondly, what is your plan to fix our public education system? The state newspaper also just reported that 1 in 10 teachers are now fleeing the system every year. We are just hemorrhaging teachers. They're giving up. What would you do to improve the school system? What is wrong, and what would you do to fix it? We'll start with you, Kevin Bryant.
Thank you, Tara. I just wrote an op-ed talking about how frustrated teachers are. Columbia has got a terrible problem of micromanaging the classroom, and teachers are frustrated, and they're not paid enough. Also, in our education, we need to have consumer choice. We do have consumer choice, a small degree that I wrote. It's for exceptional needs children. We didn't have the votes for every child. I voted for it, but we fell short, so I came back with the exceptional needs scholarship that we give to parents of exceptional needs children. When you have a free market, when you have consumer choice, you always get a better product at a lower cost. So the quick fix is, 1, get Columbia out of micromanaging the classroom, and 2, having parental choice, and that'll fix our education. We spend about 24th in the nation. The money's there, it's just getting wasted.
Thank you, Kevin Bryant. You are listening to the gubernatorial debate on 106.3 WORD, sponsored by us and the Greenville Tea Party. Yancey McGill.
Thank you. I can tell you the blessing that you have is every night that you put your head on the pillow and your wife is looking you in your eyes. She is now a retired educator of 30-something years. And so I would hear firsthand what was going on in the classroom. We have given tons of money towards education. I agree with the choice. But I will tell you this, that until we listen to what the teachers, their message, what they want us to do with those classrooms, it will never change. That issue has been raised for years and years. The teachers know what will make the difference. 50 out of 50 is unacceptable, we know it. But I can tell you now, education has had the money, but you got to keep in mind is who's sitting at that table on how that money's doled out. We've got to have full disclosure.
Thank you, Yancey McGill. The question again is, why is South Carolina dead last in the nation, and what would you do to fix it? Catherine Templeton.
Thank you, Tara. Well, first of all, our kids need to take our jobs. I was one of the business people standing behind Governor Haley when she brought in all of these jobs, but they were meant for our children, and so we have to prepare them. And you're right, it does require school choice and getting the power back to the parents, letting the teachers teach, the principals lead, and then our children will succeed if we can get the money to them. We have to take a buzzsaw, though, to all of that bureaucratic administration. We have school districts in South Carolina that have about 1,000 students, but a full complement of administrators. The money is not getting to our children. So we take a buzzsaw to all that bureaucracy, which of course you know I've done before, and we get the money to the kids. I come from a family of teachers, and former Lieutenant Governor Yancey McGill is correct that we have to listen to our teachers, but we have to listen to our parents. And until the parents have the power of choice, we are not going to improve in South Carolina. The last thing I would do is I would bring back shop class. We'll talk about that some more later.
Thank you, Catherine Templeton. John Warren?
So our education system is abysmal. It's 50th in the country. Liberals will consistently lie to all of us and say, we have a spending problem. We're not spending enough money. That's their solution to everything. But we spend over $13,000 per year per student. But when you look at where the money goes, less than half of it reaches the classroom. Less than half of it. To put that in perspective, if our education system was a charity, every Secretary of State would put it out of business. We need to make sure at least 70% of the money that we're spending reaches the classroom. We have to offer more school choice. No parent should have to send their child to a failing school. One of the ways to do that is more public charter schools. Legacy Charter School down the street is an amazing example of a public charter school that has changed an entire community and changed thousands of lives. That's what we need to do, and I will do it as governor.
John Warren, thank you very much, John. Let's turn to our pocketbooks. Let's talk a little bit about money this evening. South Carolina, of course, is one of the most highly taxed states in the Southeast. We have a legislature that apparently, no matter how much money they receive, relish the thought of spending more. The budget this year was increased by $1 billion over last year. I'd like to know, what are the specific components of South Carolina tax reform and tax relief that you would propose in light of the fact that the legislature keeps raising the taxes every time they meet? How do you propose to get these tax reforms passed in the legislature? And would you eliminate the South Carolina state income tax? And we'll begin on the far end with Lieutenant Governor Kevin Bryant.
Would I eliminate the income tax in a skinny minute? I've sponsored legislation to do just that. And you know what the tax collectors will tell you in Columbia? Well, how are we going to pay for it? How about paying for it with freedom? How about leaving money in your pockets and you can decide how to spend it? That's the best thing we can do for this economy. And the property taxes are extremely high. Property taxes, you don't own your property, you're just renting it from the government. And then you talk about a fair tax, and then the tax collectors in Columbia will say, well, a fair tax, like a sales tax, we can't depend on a current stream of revenue. Well, neither can you at your kitchen table. Why can't government operate the same way? Answer your question is eliminating income tax. I've sponsored legislation that would do so and would do it in a skinny minute. That is the best thing we can do to generate our economy, is leave money in your pockets, the consumer, and you spend it without government spending it for you.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Bryant. We are about 1/3 through this edition of our 2018 GOP Gubernatorial Forum, and the question is, specifically, what would you do to give some relief to South Carolina taxpayers? And our next response will come from former Lieutenant Governor Yancey McGill.
Lieutenant Governor Bryant and I both have worked with a lot of seniors all over this state with Lieutenant Governor's Office on Aging. I can tell you that over the years, there was a homestead exemption that was put in place up to $50,000 in value to be taken off the top. It needs to go to $100,000. It needs to go as high as it can to get the taxes off of the seniors first. That is the first thing. The income tax, that's a different issue. I'm just of the opinion that, and I have talked with others at the Department of Revenue and others there in Columbia, but we have got to figure out how to get out of the word taxation, borrow. What we need to do is grow the economy and spend accordingly. Do not spend what you simply do not have.
Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. That was Yancey McGill. Next is Catherine Templeton.
This is pretty easy. First we cut spending, then we cut taxes. Then we pay for the things that government is supposed to be doing, like safety, infrastructure, and education, and then we give the rest of the money back. When I worked for Governor Haley, we took a buzzsaw to the spending. I'm going to say buzzsaw all night, because that's what we did. We took a buzzsaw to the spending, and I actually tried to give money back in my first job, and they didn't know what to do, because there was no way to give it back to the taxpayers. When I'm your governor, we will cut income taxes. Before we even have to cut spending, we can do it tomorrow. We'll cut it by 2%. That's without cutting spending. It's just math. Right now, you were right, Bob, when you asked the question, the government is spending our money that they don't even need. They're finding a way to pay down their Christmas list. I agree with Yancey on the homestead exemption, because people that are over 65 on a fixed income who've already paid for their house don't need to pay the government property tax for their house as well.
Thank you, Catherine Templeton. Here is John Warren.
As conservative as our state is, there are only 8 states in the entire country that have higher taxes than us. That's criminal. And what do we get for those services? Crumbling roads, terrible education, and the list can go on and on and on. As governor, what we need to do first is we need to eliminate special interest loopholes. If we eliminate special interest loopholes, we can immediately cut the sales tax by half and the income tax by half. Ultimately, I would love to go to an all sales tax model, but we have to take incremental steps to get there. I was with a small business owner recently, and he was a native of South Carolina. He was very successful, and he told me the one regret that he has is that he started his business in South Carolina. That is shameful. And the reason he said that was because he said that we roll out the carpet, give all these tax incentives for all the companies that are moving here, but we penalize the ones that are started here. And as governor, I will prevent that.
Thank you, John Warren. Now for the individual question section of the debate, we'll start with you, Kevin Bryant. These were submitted by the Greenville Tea Party. Mr. Lieutenant Governor, you served as a state senator from Anderson County for nearly 12 years. Last year, when Senator Hugh Leatherman shirked his constitutional duty as Senate Pro Tem to ascend to the office of Lieutenant Governor, he refused. We could have finally been rid of him. That's just my commentary. Instead, he concocted a scheme to resign so as not to fulfill his obligation to the citizens of South Carolina. You willingly volunteered to be appointed as Lieutenant Governor, thus allowing Senator Leatherman to shirk his responsibility and carry out his scheme. Aren't you a part of the good old boy problem in South Carolina by helping to facilitate such a brazen move to leave a former Democrat as the most powerful man in South Carolina in charge of the Senate? Kevin Bryant.
Thank you for the question, Tara. I want to ask anybody here to raise their hand if they think Hugh Leatherman looks out for the taxpayer. Anybody? How many people here feel that Senator Leatherman looks out for life or your Second Amendment rights? Anybody? How many people here would like to have Hugh Leatherman a heartbeat away from governor? Who wants to elect him governor? Raise your hand. I saw it as an opportunity to serve this state, and I took it, and it's been an honor, and I've loved serving each and every South Carolinian as their representative. The other thing, Tara, is that vacancy could have been left vacant. It's happened before, and I took it as an opportunity to serve the whole state, and I'm honored to serve every South Carolinian and look out for their taxpayer dollars.
Thank you, Kevin Bryant. This question is for you, Mr. Yancey McGill. You are a former Democrat who served in the South Carolina Senate for 25 years, then as Lieutenant Governor for about 6 months. What gives you the right to declare yourself a Republican and run for governor? Aren't politicians like you who simply change their political party stripes to get elected part of the problem in South Carolina?
Good question. We come from an area that if we wanted or wished to serve, what you had to do is you had to run Democrat. Did I run Democrat and win? Yes, we did. I can tell you right now it was by choice, but when we got to Columbia, we were a state senator. I can tell you what that means. It's all about public service. I saw on TV late one night, this was years ago, about Ronald Reagan and others that were Democrats that changed parties. And I can tell you that we ran as a Democrat. We won with 75, 78% of the vote in a minority district. But I can also tell you that when we got into Columbia, our voting pattern and our records were always based on being very conservative and fiscally responsible. I'll just tell you this.
Are we good? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Yancey McGill. The next question is the one I would have asked Governor McMaster.
Yeah, we
had
seem to be skipping over someone in
deigned
the
us,
dais here
to,
tonight.
yes,
Sarah.
deigned to show up. The ad you are currently running on 106.3 WORD makes two wild claims. The first is that you have defunded Planned Parenthood, which is strange because it's still in the budget. Maybe in another time space continuum, but not in this one. And also the second thing, you claim that you have more South Carolinians working than ever before. The problem with that is that we have the lowest ever recorded for 4 months running workforce participation rate. To give you some idea, in the 90s, it was 68% of adults 18 to 64 working. Today, it is 58%. How do you arrive at those crazy numbers in your ad? Let's see what Mr. McMaster has to say for himself.
Oh, my Lord, don't laugh.
All right, crickets. There we go. Now, perhaps we'll let him call in if he wants to call in and answer the question.
I believe that was the sound of crickets in the background, Tara, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Just to lighten the mood a little bit. All right. You're listening to 106.3 WORD's gubernatorial debate. The next question is for Catherine Templeton. And now this is a... I couldn't quite hear. Okay.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Are we good? Okay.
Never mind.
The next question is for Catherine Templeton. The Post report and Courier reported, so it might be true, that all of...
Stop there.
Well, I want to give myself an out. That all of the other gubernatorial candidates, except for yourself, has largely disclosed your tax returns, shared their complete tax returns with the Post and Courier, and Mr. McMaster has called for you to disclose who your consulting clients are so voters can see if there are any ties to state agencies or firms that lobby lawmakers. The tax returns of you and your husband show that you have consistently made over $1 million per year for the last several years. However, all the forms and documents of your tax returns have not been completely released. Will you commit to releasing the list of your clients who are paying you, and how much of your income came from contracts for your consulting company?
No money came from any contracts with the state that haven't been disclosed. In fact, when Governor Haley hired me to be her Secretary of Labor and to work on her cabinet, she knew she was getting a buzzsaw, and she knew that I was going to be conservative, and she knew that we were going to be transparent. Do you know that when you get appointed to the cabinet, not once, but twice, and when the Democrats filibuster you and look under all of the rocks, that you have to put more information out into the public than I would say anybody else running in this race? My tax returns and my husband's have been released to the public. Every single solitary dollar I have ever made, ever earned, doing the job that Nikki Haley asked me to do has always been, and is currently a part of the public record. So don't get distracted by the political will of my crickets next door. You have probably more about me in public than you have about anybody else up here.
Thank you, Ms. Catherine Templeton. Mr. John Warren, you also were named by the Post and Courier as not having provided all of the information. You were the other candidate. Would you commit to providing it? And the second part of the question is submitted by the Greenville Tea Party. As a former Marine, you talk very boldly and make some pretty brash claims that are going to evoke the ire of some of the entrenched legislative leaders, as we're seeing right now with Mr. Trump. And because we are, such a dominantly controlled legislative state, how do you expect your bluster will help you to get anything done for the citizens of South Carolina if you are at loggerheads with the legislature? So 2 quick questions.
So in terms of my taxes, I have released all of my taxes except for one LLC. That was strictly because I have partners in that. I have disclosed all of my charitable contributions. My wife and I gave half of our salary to charities. So I am the candidate that has given everything out to the public. In terms of working with the legislature, there's a wonderful section of legislators down in Columbia who are conservative and they're reform-minded. 1/3 of the House has only been there for 3 years or less. they're coming up with very innovative ways in, for example, changing the state constitution to give the governor more power. And I will work, and I look forward to working with them. However, there are a few bad apples, and Marines believe in the stick as much as they believe in the carrot. And I will systematically target the ones who do not want to go along with reform agenda, like Hugh Leatherman, and I will get them out of there because that's the only way to have real change.
John Warren, thank you very much, sir. We'll go back to a general question for each of the candidates, and this seems to come up historically in every gubernatorial race, and yet not much seems to be done to be accomplished in terms of people who are believers in the right to life. And the question has to do with Planned Parenthood, and this is for each of you. The question is, will you vote for any, and by any, I mean any form of funding for Planned Parenthood in any state budget, regardless of how it may be described, how it may be hidden away, tucked somewhere in the budget? Are you prepared to vote for any budget with funding for Planned Parenthood in it? And furthermore, will you today state at this forum whether or not you support the killing of the unborn, including, I should say excluding, the exceptions of rape, incest, and the life of the mother?
And I think the author of the question meant sign the budget with Planned Parenthood
Yes.
funding, either expressly or not expressly in the budget.
Right, and we'll begin with, let's go ahead and work back up the other way and begin with John Warren.
So I am proud to say that I am 100% pro-life. I believe that life begins at conception. The fact that we control every aspect of state government and that we still fund $30 million in Planned Parenthood is criminal. That is because Republicans continuously betray us, and as governor, I will not allow one penny to go to Planned Parenthood. I have always been pro-life. I continue to be pro-life. I have always supported candidates that are pro-life, and I would never, ever vote for a candidate that is not pro-life. And I think that is very important. Governor McMaster, he supports Hugh Leatherman. Hugh Leatherman is funding Planned Parenthood. You can't be a conservative and vote for people like Hugh Leatherman, endorse people like Hugh Leatherman, and you can't be a conservative and support other candidates that are pro-choice. And as governor, I will fight to uphold life at all costs. Thanks.
Thank you, John. And Catherine Templeton.
I pledge to sign any law that reduces the number of abortions, including the Personhood Act. Not only does life begin at conception, and not only did I stop or make sure there was no money going to Planned Parenthood when I was working for Governor Haley. We didn't have a big political row about it. It's when you weren't looking, we were making sure your money wasn't going to Planned Parenthood. But let me tell you why I'm pro-life. When I was pregnant with our twins, the doctors called my husband Morgan and I in and told us something was wrong. They told us they needed to run more tests. Now, I just found out that I had a life-threatening disease brought on by the pregnancy, and they said that one of your twins may need to be aborted to save the life of the other one. Well, Morgan and I didn't run any more tests. You can put the timer down. I'm going to finish this one. Morgan and I didn't run any more tests because these were God's children for us to protect as long as he would allow it. That's why I'm pro-life.
And Yancey McGill.
Always voted pro-life in the state Senate, and I can tell you that will not vote in favor, would veto and aggressively defeat what happened in that Senate the other day. There was no excuse in it. Handful of people controlled the future of this state, and I'm telling you, it goes back to knowing how to count those votes. I'm just telling you that, look it up in your scripture, write it down, Jeremiah 1:5. God knew every person when we were in our mother's womb. Think about it. We were known before, way before it became a mega issue. I will tell you, Bob, that pro-life, and this gentleman beside me is has led a major charge in the state Senate this year as the leader.
And we will give the gentleman to whom you referred, Lieutenant Governor Kevin Bryant, an opportunity to speak on his own behalf on this.
You said gentlemen, you referring to me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. Bobby, I sponsored the personhood bill. It was one of the last bills I sponsored before leaving the Senate, and I appreciate all of my friends up here for supporting that. That's bigger than any campaign, and I truly appreciate their commitment to life. As far as Planned Parenthood, when a bill passes the House and Senate, it needs to be ratified by the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate. That's myself. I told the legislature last year that if this year's budget contains a single penny of your money going to Planned Parenthood, I will not ratify it. I wrote the plan on how to defund Planned Parenthood. Several courageous conservatives in the Senate brought the fight to the Senate floor, fell short a few votes. The House overwhelmingly defunded Planned Parenthood. So thank your House members and encourage your Senate members to support the House position on the budget. And last, I have voted against every single Medicaid budget for that reason.
Thank you, Kevin Bryant. Want to jump now to energy exploration. We'll start with you, John Warren. Texas right now has a GDP growth rate, that's the economy growth rate for the state, that is just about double South Carolina's. And in the nation, the number one growth industry right now and the number one growth industry leading Texas's economic growth is mining specifically. We have a chance to do that off our coast, both for natural gas and for oil. What is your specific stance on energy exploration? We're not debating drilling right now. We haven't gotten to that yet. They're just debating exploration off South Carolina's coast, regardless of the alleged aesthetic disruption proposed by those opposed to exploration. And I want to know specifically, yes or no, if you will explore, not drill yet, just explore the natural resources of this state so that an informed decision can be made. John Warren.
So I believe that American energy is very important. I applaud President Trump for opening up Alaska. I think I'm the only one on this stage that actually had to go to the Middle East and fight, probably because of oil. So I want us to get off the dependence of Middle Eastern oil. However, I'm a conservative, and what that means is I believe in local rule. And the vast majority of the people in the southern part of our state are against oil exploration. And the reason for that is jobs. Because our number one industry is tourism. And without those beaches, tourism goes away. So I am all about protecting jobs. I am a job creator. I'm the only one up here who's created hundreds of jobs. And I will fight for jobs. But I will tell you that if someone in the lower part told me that we could create jobs by mining Paris Mountain or mining Table Rock, I would be totally against that. So I will fight for jobs, and I support American energy, just not off the South Carolina coast.
That was John Warren. Catherine Templeton, your specific stance on energy exploration off South Carolina's coast.
Tara, you and I have talked about this a lot, so you could probably answer the question for me. If it would bring more jobs, if it would bring energy independence, if it would bring prosperity to South Carolina, and it would do no harm, then I would be supportive of it. But right now in South Carolina, there are tens of thousands of jobs attached to our tourism, and it would just be a net loss. In fact, what's even more important, let's take this out of the government. The private businesses are not knocking on South Carolina's door right now to explore off the coast of South Carolina, because just like in Florida, they have looked at the other parts of the nation and they see that there are oil stores there. We don't need it right now. And any good leader is going to make sure that we protect the economy first, do no harm, and in the future, if we need to look at this again, I'm of course open to it. However, right now, offshore drilling and exploration is not what South Carolina needs.
Thank you, Catherine Templeton. You're listening to the gubernatorial debate on 106.3 WORD. Yancey McGill.
Offshore oil drilling would be horrible for this state. It sends the wrong message to the tourism. It sends the wrong message for the future of this state. I can tell you that there are groups in South Carolina right now that are trying to persuade local people on the coast to go with offshore drilling. They're not being successful. No money. This is not about the money. It is about protecting the environment of South Carolina.
Yancey McGill, thank you for your answer. Kevin Bryant.
Thank you, Tara. I guess I have a disagreement from all my friends to my left up here. We cannot make an informed decision on drilling if we don't explore. Let's go out there and see what we have and see where it is. I am for exploration, and I'll tell you why. A lot of folks feel like we probably have natural gas off of our shores, not petroleum. And we all know the risks for natural gas are far less than those for petroleum. But I want to explore, I want to see what we have and where it is. And like it's been said, we do need to protect our tourism industry, and that needs to be taken under consideration. But we need to find out where it is and make that informed decision.
Thank you. Kevin Bryant.
We have heard the name Senator Hugh Leatherman bandied about incessantly during this campaign, ad nauseum, I would say, in fact. Hugh Leatherman may be the poster child for those who favor term limits. I believe Hugh Leatherman came into office, first elected office in South Carolina, shortly after Wade Hampton hung up his sword. My question, therefore, is your thoughts on term limits, not just for South Carolina state elected offices, for the Senate, for the legislature, but all the way down to the city and county council level. I'd just like to get your feelings on term limits. And these, of course, would be imposed on you should you win the governorship as well. Let's begin with Lieutenant Governor Kevin Bryant.
Well, Bobby, it's interesting that this legislative state did impose term limits on the executive branch, but not themselves. Imagine that. They just wanted more power. I do support term limits, but I need to add something that I want folks to consider. If we have term limits for elected office, we also need to have term limits for the bureaucrats. Because if we have all these new people coming in and all the bureaucrats stay, then we have actually unelected folks that are running this state. So I do support term limits, and here again, because of the term limits on the executive branch, not the legislative, has given this legislative state even more power. And our founders envisioned 3 distinct branches of government. We even have term limits on the judiciary branch. We have one branch of government in South Carolina, that's the legislature. They control the executive branch, and they can control the judiciary.
Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. Let's skip around a bit and go to John Warren next.
I think term limits are vital to save our country and to save our state. I see 2 main benefits from term limits. Number one, it will end a lot of the corruption because people continually go down there, and they're not going down there to serve us. They're going down there to serve themselves. So they're so dependent on the special interests, on the lobbyists, that they forget about the taxpayer, and they continually get reelected because incumbents have a distinct advantage. Take Hugh Leatherman, for instance. He had $1 million for a Senate race. His opponent had $100,000, and he barely lost. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to help his opponent next time. I'm going to help him get financing. I'm going to campaign with him, and that's how you get Hugh Leatherman out. Because ultimately, until you change the legislature, you're never going to get term limits passed. You have to change the legislature to do it, and that's what I'm going to do as governor.
Thank you, John Warren. Catherine Templeton.
Unfortunately, when Governor Haley tried to campaign against Hugh Leatherman's last run, it didn't work. That's why we have to have term limits. There's no amount of money you can throw at Hugh Leatherman and have Florence voters vote against him because they get more because he's there. The longer you're there, the more power you have, and when Hugh Leatherman's gone, there'll be another Hugh Leatherman. There always has been. Term limits are vital if we want to make sure that we make any changes in the state of South Carolina. Right now, the fox is guarding the hen house. It's the legislature who has to term limit themselves. So until we put this in the Constitution, again, give the power back to the people. You vote on it. You tell the legislature to go, serve, do your very best, and then come home and live under the laws you created for the rest of us.
Thank you, Catherine Templeton. And former Lieutenant Governor Yancey McGill.
Well said, Catherine Templeton. I can tell you this, I'm in favor of term limits. I term limit myself out of the South Carolina Senate. Still had a couple more years on my term, and I came out whenever we took the lieutenant governor's job by state statute after being elected pro tem of the Senate when Glenn McConnell became president down at the College of Charleston. But I'm here to tell you, everybody deserves a chance to participate. There are individuals in here that would love to serve in the Senate and serve in the House. It's not easy. It's work. You can leave a job making $200,000 a year, $500,000 a year, make $10,400 a year. It's not hard to understand that financial well-being, but I will tell you this, term limits will afford the younger people to be able to participate in the state.
Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor, and I appreciate the reference to Glenn McConnell, a man who, while serving as President pro tempore of the Senate, once referred to myself and the late Russ Castle on the floor of the Senate as a rabid shock jock, a title that I still wear proudly.
Okay, moving on to the next question. Got to get this one in. We'll start with you, Kevin Bryant. We've all heard a lot about the Santee Cooper scandal, and it continues to be a burden on the SCANA scandal on South Carolina ratepayers. What's your plan to fix it? And should the multi-billion-dollar project be scuttled, or do you propose selling it to another company who would bring it online?
Well, last fall, I publicly said the board of Santee Cooper needs to go. Anybody that owned a company and lost $4 billion, wouldn't you get rid of your board? Certainly, and we've only gotten rid of one member. The second thing we need to do is this disaster that we've seen is what happens when government controls the utility industry. And all these new proposals are more government control. I got news for you. Government can't fix anything. You know what can? Is consumer choice. Here again, just like education, states like Texas, Pennsylvania, and Florida, they have consumer choice with their natural gas and with their electricity. So I'm not for more government control. I'm for less government control, have a free market, because here again, like I've said before, the free market, consumer choice always gets you a better product at a lower cost.
Thank you, Kevin Bryant. Yancey McGill?
First, when that piece of legislation was passed around on the floor of the Senate, I'll never forget it. I plainly stated it was going to obligate each person in this room to foot the bill if they had collapsed. I did not co-author the bill, did not sign it, nor did I support it. I'm telling you it's about fiscal accountability, and when those decisions have to be made right there, I can just tell you that corruption at its best. There are individuals on those boards that left with all these mega bonuses, some left with big retirements, and I can tell you now that hopefully with all this so-called investigation going on by the feds, all of this will be unveiled in the near future.
Thank you, Yancey McGill. Catherine Templeton is up next, and the question again is what you would do about the Santee Cooper scandal.
First, we get our money back. Then, we stop them from taking more of our money. This law was passed by special interest monopoly lobbyists paying the establishment, do I have all of President Trump's words in there? The swamp? To take our money and give it to their fat cat executives. And now we have some of the highest rates in the United States of America. Mr. McMaster, as Attorney General, did you allow that unconstitutional law to pass? And then when you were running for governor and you found out about it, did you take $115,000 in campaign contributions from SCANA executives? Or how about not the first session, but the second session that Governor McMaster had with the legislature to actually get rid of this law? And it still hasn't happened. When I'm your governor, I'm going to get your money back. I'm going to stop them from taking, and I am going to make sure that the people of South Carolina can afford their groceries and their light bill.
We would give Governor McMaster a 30-second rebuttal if he were here, but he's not.
Well, that's all right. Let's see if we can have Governor McMaster rebut what Ms. Templeton just said. Governor, do you have any comment to make on the charge against you, sir? I believe that pretty much sums up the governor's position. on that issue. Sorry for the interjection.
Okay. John Warren, your answer to the question.
Santee Cooper is a total disaster. It is an example of when government controls something, it goes poorly. We've lost $4 billion. I have called immediately for the firing of that board. It is criminal that that board has not been fired. Not only did they lose $4 billion, they allowed a CEO to retire and get an $800,000 a year pension. Nowhere on any real-world business experience does that happen. So we need to fire the board. We need to bring in a quality board. Right now, the board's made up mostly of contributors, except for the last head of the board, which Governor McMaster appointed, which is a Richard Quinn attorney-client. So of all people, who are we going to support and appoint? He appoints a Richard Quinn client. We need to bring in a quality board. We need to do a forensic audit. I want to find out where the $4 billion went. And finally, we need to prevent any more money going to a failed nuclear project that is never going to come online. And as governor, I will make that happen.
Thank you, John Warren.
Tara, I don't mean to interrupt, but we do have Richard Quinn here as well, if he wants to have 30 seconds to rebut. There's
Yes,
a picture right there.
I would love it, yes. Mr. Quinn, I understand you've been distracted somewhat recently by ongoing investigations into the so-called Quindom. Your son, of course, recently having been convicted for having performed the multitasking job of being a state legislator and at the same time a lobbyist. But despite those distractions, do you have any comment for us, sir? Apparently not. I guess we'll proceed with the evening's questions and answers.
If either of them would like to text in on the text line, though, we would be happy
Absolutely.
to take your
Absolutely.
answers there from the text line, 71307. Okay, Bob, I know you've got the next question.
I do indeed. We have talked about the unique structure of South Carolina government, the fact that our Constitution, which was written in 1895, many people, many of them a lot smarter than me, have suggested it's time for here in 2018 for the Constitution to be rewritten. Would you support a move to create a new Constitution? I know that a number of freshman legislators have called for this to happen. Would you support their effort? And as a follow-up, what specifically are 2 or 3 things that you think need to be changed in the South Carolina Constitution? And let's begin with John Warren.
So I fully support changing the Constitution from 1895. I think Governor McMaster might have been running in 1895 when that was created. But we need real change. A lot of the new legislature is a huge proponent of that, so I support them fully. Some of the things that we need to accomplish with that is we need term limits. We've already talked about that. We also need a lot of other ethics reforms. We need arm's length transactions. We need to require competitive bidding and end no-bid contracts. Those are some of the things that we would like to do. But right now, if you cannot do that, the first thing the governor needs to do is attack what he or she can when they get to office. And what I would do, I would start with the agencies. We have 110 state agencies. How many computer systems do we have? 110. What wasteful spending? I would attack the 16 agencies that the governor controls. I would audit them to make sure that we run them more efficiently, save taxpayer dollars, and improve customer service.
Thank you very much. And next is Catherine Templeton.
Term limits, term limits, term limits. Spending cap, spending cap, spending cap. Let's also make sure that we take a buzzsaw to the legislative state and actually give the governor the responsibility for education and roads. I think we've talked about all of this tonight, but it's pretty basic and common sense. And unless we put it in the Constitution, unless we give it to the voters to decide and then put it in the Constitution, what will happen is we will just elect another crop of legislators and then they will undo whatever we've done. So the Constitution and the good statesmen and women who have come in to actually serve in our legislature recently, I support them fully, and I hope that we can be successful in January when I'm your governor.
Thank you, Ms. Templeton. Here is former Lieutenant Governor Yancey McGill.
Thank you very much. I would be in favor of that Constitution if we would do away with taxes and taxing anybody 65 and older. I'm going to tell you now that even back in, I guess it wasn't many years ago, in 1975, Home Rule went into effect, which gave full authority to the local governments. Years ago, their budgets were formulated at the state level. It was changed. The school districts, their budgets were formulated at the state level. Many school boards were appointed by the Senate and the House. I can just tell you that we got a lot of immediate cleaning up by giving the local governments their due. We still micromanage the local municipalities, the county governments. We simply can't let them go. And I can tell you now that a lot of the mandates that hit you as taxpayers through what they call revenue enhancements, the same thing as a tax, I can tell you now that that's not going to change until we give back.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Yancey
sir.
McGill. Kevin Bryant.
Thank you. The Constitution of 1895, written by Ben Tillman, was based on racism. At that time, African Americans were a majority of this state, and they intentionally put it that way so if an African American was ever elected governor, that governor would have very little power. And that has resulted in this legislative state that we've been talking about a lot tonight. This legislative state that controls the judiciary, controls the executive branch, is a breeding ground for corruption. When a lawmaker, Rick Quinn, was caught selling his votes for millions of dollars, and all he has to do is pay a $1,000 fine, that is an insult to you, the taxpayer, and an invitation for corruption. He's part of the family that first order of business was to have a family meeting with the Godfather in the governor's mansion. That is what's running your government now, and it's got to stop.
Thank you, Kevin Bryant. In his current campaign commercial running on 106.3 WORD, Governor McMaster is claiming that more South Carolinians are working than ever before. That, quite simply, is just not true. In fact, our workforce participation rate has hit an all-time low. It has never been that low before. The workforce participation rate is, of course, the percentage of adults aged 18 to 64 in the workforce. And it's a better measure of work and employment than the unemployment rate, which, as we all know now, does not include and has not since the Bush administration, the first one, people who have given up looking for a job. We're at an all-time low workforce participation in the state, and we are the 5th worst in the nation for workforce participation. Do we have a jobs crisis in this state? What is going on with this? Why is our rate so low, and what will you do to change it? We'll start with you, John Warren.
We have a crisis, and it starts with our education system. People, although we're spending $13,000 per year per student, people, when they leave high school, they're not prepared for jobs. One example of this, I was talking to a major employer, and out of state, it takes 6 applications for them to find one quality candidate. Here in South Carolina, it's 26, and that goes back to workforce development. The long-term strategy should be workforce development. That means bring back SHOP, bring back apprenticeship. Everyone that goes to high school should leave high school able to interview for jobs, being able to have a quality resume, and we also need to go back to summer internships. So we need to get the high schoolers prepared to take great jobs like at Michelin, at BMW, and make sure that people are qualified to get jobs. We can recruit all the businesses here, but if we don't have quality candidates to fill those jobs, we're going to have to bring them in from somewhere else, and that is something that needs to get fixed with the next governor's administration.
Thank you, John Warren. Catherine Templeton is up next.
So first we have to bring SHOP back. I was one of the business people standing behind Governor Haley when she brought in all of these jobs for us. And when we get our children out of high school, they've got to be able to support themselves. You know, my grandfather was a plumber, and he did really well by 5 children. And I'm not sure when that stopped being honorable in South Carolina. We have to make sure, on top of that, getting our kids ready, that they know how to balance a checkbook when they get out. Shake somebody's hand and look them in the eye. The soft skills that we've stopped teaching in South Carolina, if the parents would parent, maybe we wouldn't have to, but right now it's falling on us. The other thing is that if we don't take a buzzsaw to some of these welfare programs, it's going to continue to be easier to sit on the couch and collect welfare than to take one of the 60,000 open jobs in South Carolina. So if we let the Democrats take over in November, we're going to have more welfare and less job participation in South Carolina. My welfare reform requires work requirements for Medicaid, and if you're going to get unemployment, you better not be able-bodied.
Thank you, Catherine Templeton. Yancey McGill.
There's a big difference between skilled labor and unskilled labor. I can tell you can bring all the industry you want, but you got to be able to match the workforce. I will tell you that we spent a lot of hours with Governor Haley, and I can tell you that she was one of the best recruiters for industry the state's ever had. She worked hard. And I'm also tell you that that when she became governor, Catherine, your relationship and all of our relationships were good with her. The governor called, she wanted me to come down. I went down to an office, and she wanted me to put 5 issues before the General Assembly for her. And it was accountability, transparency, and it went on, roll call voting. And we told her we'd be happy to help her, but she wanted me to help her do it in the House and the Senate. I told her I could not do it. I chaired 26 state agency budgets. Commerce was one of the 26, Port of Charleston. But I can just tell you that whenever it was said and done, we passed her issues. She came out with a surprise report card, and she gave us an A to an A+ on that report card.
And Yancey McGill, I think your time is up, but thank you for your response. Kevin Bryant.
Thank you for the question, Tara. You know what happens when you subsidize laziness? You know what you get more of? You get more laziness. And that's what we're doing. When we talk about our low unemployment based on the participation rate, and that's very critical, and I appreciate y'all bringing that up, the participation rate is low because we are paying people to stay home and not work. That's what we're doing. Let me tell you, as governor, we're going to have the work requirements in Medicaid. I've offered a sliding scale to cover these folks who are getting into the workforce where they don't just cut off, because Medicaid pays for everything, literally everything. The highest copay I've ever seen is $3.40. So take a look at that sliding scale on our contract. DEW, the Department of Employment and Workforce, is a cabinet agency, and it is running very well. We found where a bank teller was getting caught stealing from a bank, convicted, and drew full unemployment. I would take the well in the Senate with examples like this. And then Governor Haley appointed one of her best cabinet agencies, I said one of them, a new director, and the culture changed overnight, which has resulted in $700 million of tax savings in unemployment taxes.
Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. Appreciate that. Is my mic hot? There we go. Can you crank it up just a bit, Robert? Thank you. During this campaign for the GOP nomination for governor, as we've seen in many other states through this primary season, it seems as if there are many Republicans who are trying to ride on the coattails of President Trump, if you will, to out-Trump each other to express their support for the president's programs. Many, some were not individuals who actually supported the Trump campaign when it was going, but now based on his success, they're wanting to attach themselves to it. To that history, a little background from everyone, if you don't mind, on voting history. And this is a two-part question for everyone. The first part is, have you ever voted for a Democrat? And secondarily, have you always voted in Republican presidential primaries? And because this question may seem targeted, we'll begin with Catherine Templeton.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So first of all, I have, when President Trump was given a question similar to that, he said, I am a conservative. I am by nature a conservative. When Governor Haley hired me, she knew I was a conservative, and I've never voted in a Democratic primary. In fact, let me be Trumpety about this, okay? I'm the only person up here right now who's been offered a job by President Trump and by Nikki Haley. So I think that speaks volumes. If it doesn't let me tell you this, my father would not have let me back in the house if I weren't a conservative. So that's important as well. Look, you can go check all of that with the South Carolina Elections Commissions easily. But let's be very clear. Go look at my record and see what I did. I took a buzzsaw to government. You don't cut and fire entrenched bureaucrats, cut spending, bring 7,500 jobs by getting, by cutting the Obama administration, unless you are a conservative.
Thank you, Ms. Templeton. Yancey McGill.
I am a conservative. I voted in a Democratic primary because I ran as a Democrat, and so that's evident. But I will tell you this, that I again state it's about public service. It's about knowing and having the knowledge to make a difference in a position. And as I stated early in this discussion, all four of the individuals seated here today are not only fiscally, but academically conservative in what they say and what they do, but you got to have the backbone. And if you cannot put those votes together, it will spell out failure instead of success. What will happen down in Columbia, the next governor has got a big chore on their hands. I can tell you right now, it may be teams of new CPAs going into Columbia, but disclosure has got to be the bottom line.
Thank you, Yancey McGill, and Lieutenant Governor Kevin Bryant.
Thank you, Bobby. The first question, have I ever voted for a Democrat? The answer is yes, I'm confessing. In 1996, I voted for a Democrat for state senate. Interestingly, it was the same seat that I occupied in 2005. He later switched parties and had a fairly conservative record.
And that man down there is nothing but the most conservative man in America,
I'm to the right for a reason.
To the right for a reason.
I have voted in every single primary and every single Republican primary and every single general election since I've been 18. It's for folks like Mr. Warren who fought for that freedom, and I think it's disgusting that people just simply don't find the time to vote. That's an insult to our veterans. But we have a Republican majority in Columbia. We don't have a conservative majority. It's because we have open primaries. We need to register by party and keep Democrats from voting in the Republican primary. That rhinocrat majority is because of the open primaries.
Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor, and the just referenced John Warren.
Well, I am proud to say that I have always voted for Republicans, and not only that, I only support conservative Republicans. I don't support open borders. I don't support candidates that support open borders. I am always a Republican, but I am a conservative, and that's why I'm a Republican, because I believe in the Republican platform. So we have to have people that are going to go and stand for conservative ideals and fight for the taxpayer. You cannot be a conservative when you vote for Democrats. You cannot be a conservative if you don't vote in Republican primaries. And I have always done those two things. I will fight for the taxpayers. I spent 4 years on active duty fighting for our sovereignty. It's very important that we elect a true conservative, one that represents all of our conservative ideals in this room, and that's me, and that's why I'm going to be governor in January.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Lieutenant Governor Kevin Bryant opened a can of worms that I'd like to pursue a bit and do some fishing with. I believe it was 5 years ago when the last effort was made through the judiciary to close the South Carolina primary. In other words, to only allow registered Republicans. So we don't register by party in South Carolina. To only allow registered Republicans to vote in a GOP primary in South Carolina. The comparison that I have made in the past is that if the Pope passes away, the College of Cardinals doesn't get together and call the mullahs in Tehran and ask them who they think the next Pope should be. Conversely, it doesn't make much sense for Democrats to be able to help decide which Republican candidates will get a nomination by crossing over and voting in the GOP primary. Therefore, the question then is, I think Lieutenant Governor Bryant has already answered it. Mr. McGill and Ms. Templeton and Ms. Warren will give you an opportunity to ask, would you use the bully pulpit of the governorship to twist arms and do whatever is necessary, whether it was through a legislative or a judicial solution to the problem to only allow Republicans to be able to vote in the South Carolina primary. Mr. Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you, Bobby. Not only will, but I've done it. I've sponsored registration by party. The Rhinocrat majority wouldn't give us a hearing. During the motion period, I called to pull it out of committee. And out of 46 members of the Senate, we only got about 16 or 17 votes. That just tells you how bad the Rhinocrat majority is in Columbia. And it works the other way also. Back when Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton were running for president, remember Rush Limbaugh was telling Republicans to go vote in the Democrat primary for Hillary. Obviously, she was the weaker candidate, but I just don't think that's right either. We need, if you want to, in June, we are having a party nomination. It's not a general election. And fortunately, we have 3 extreme liberal Democrats running in their primary. That's why a conservative like me is going to come out of this primary and represent conservatives all over this state.
Thank you, Mr. Bryant. Yancey McGill.
We are Republican. We joined the local Republican Party. I can tell you years ago where I was elected that the Republican Party most voted in the Democratic primary in order to help certain individuals win. And I can tell you now it wasn't a few, it was the mass majority. I can tell you the same as we went to Columbia as a conservative, a state senator. I can also tell you that we voted in many cases more conservative than the Republican members of the Senate. And we took a lot of votes in the Senate, and I can tell you now we lobbied with Nikki Haley on electing a lot of judicial people, bringing new potentials into the state, but we looked at the people's, thank you, sir, we looked at the people's wishes, and that's where we went.
Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. And Catherine Templeton.
South Carolina is one of the most conservative states in the nation, if not the most conservative state in the nation. Republicans hold the governor's office, the House, and the Senate. Yet look at what we have. Rhinocrats, Republican in name only, whatever you want to call it. Long ago, Hugh Leatherman made deals to have certain legislators change parties so he could have a majority. He too is a Democrat. We have to make sure that we close our primaries to just conservatives. If you want to register as a Democrat, go register, but you should put your name on it. If you want to register as a Republican, come see us. It's very simple. It's disingenuous to do it differently. And I also think it's important, too, to look and see the results of the corruption in Columbia as a result of this Rhinocrat majority. We end up with people who are self-dealing and not transparent, and we don't even know who they are when they stand up and support each other and they have an R by their name, and it misleads the public that really things are being done for them.
Thank you, Ms. Templeton. And John Warren.
I will do anything and everything to close the primaries. The people in this room are the ones that should be deciding who the Republican candidates are. And I'll give you 2 names as to why we don't have that. Number 1 is Hugh Leatherman, and number 2 is Lindsey Graham. Those are the 2 people that continuously profit because we don't have a closed primary. And I will fight for everyone in this room. I will fight hard to close the primaries. You know, right now, we have a major problem. We've already talked about it, but we have a major problem down in Columbia. And the problem is we can't tell who is who. We actually have 3 parties. We have the Democrats, and they vote like Democrats. We have conservatives who uphold the conservative Republican platform. And then we have Republicans. And those Republicans that I'm talking about continuously betray us, and you see this on a national level. You see this with a $1.3 trillion omnibus bill, and we have to have real change, and it starts with closing the Republican primaries.
Thank you very much.
Well, it looks like we are just about out of time, so we will do the 1-minute closing statement that ends the debate. We'll start with you, Kevin Bryant.
Thank you, Tara, and I want to thank each and every one of y'all for being here tonight. I have brought up the Godfather. First order of business in the governor's mansion was having the Godfather and the family over there. We have got to restore integrity into our government. Now, one of these days, I'm going to wake up with a horse head in my bed. I'm just waiting for that.
Me too.
But when you go across South Carolina and you look at the integrity and the character of South Carolina, and then you go to the Columbia bubble, it's not reflected there. It's not reflected there. And I ask you to join and help me. I will be honored to serve you as your governor, and together we will restore integrity and return your government back to you, the taxpayer. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin Bryant. Yancey McGill, closing statement.
We started talking about public service, public commitment. Everyone in here has had family that has served on the battlefield. We've all had family to come home, but we had a lot of family not to come home. My father lost a brother on the battlefield over in Italy back in '44. 26 days later, he lost his other brother in a bomber going into Berlin. He was a gunner and it was shot down. And then his sister's husband was killed in the Korean War. 3 uncles. I don't need much to motivate me to give my time and my energy. It is about public service. Everyone needs to be involved. That's why I'm so proud to walk in this room tonight and see so many faces in this room, because some areas you go to, Bob, around the state, there are not a whole lot of people involved. But to all our veterans in here, I've heard.
Thank you, Mr. McGill. Your time is up. You're listening to closing statements in the gubernatorial debate on 106.3 WORD. Catherine Templeton.
South Carolina is one of the most conservative states in the nation, but the good old boys are in charge. And as a result, prisoners are jumping the fence. It is too politically incorrect to protect our history and our monuments. It's easier to sit on the couch and collect welfare than to take one of the 60,000 open jobs in South Carolina. And idle hands lead to an opioid epidemic that's killed more than the Vietnam War. The kids who do want to work, we're failing because our schools are dead last in the nation. And the roads to get those kids to school and us to work in church and home are crumbling under our feet. In South Carolina, we used to be able to afford a John boat and a week at the beach. And now we can't afford the grocery bill or the light bill because corrupt Columbia is costing you money. We've got to elect a buzzsaw to go to Columbia and make sure someone who can't be bought, someone who owes no favors, and someone who will shake up the system instead of answering to it. I'm the only person that Nikki Haley and Donald Trump has offered a job that's running for this election. I want to make sure you show up June 12th, and let's make it a great day in South Carolina again.
Thank you, Catherine Templeton. John Warren.
Thank you. I'm a businessman, a conservative, and a Marine. And this election comes down to leadership. And I will tell you that in leading over 300 combat missions, in growing a billion-dollar company and creating hundreds of jobs, leadership comes down to 3 things. Number 1, it comes down to a person's core values, their core competencies, and whether or not they have courage. When you look at my core values, I am a true conservative. I've always supported conservatives. I've always voted for Republicans. I'm also a businessman. I'm a Christian. I believe in common sense, and I believe in service. Those are the core values that I am taking to Columbia to represent all of you. Number 2, when it comes to core competencies, we can no longer continue to send incompetent people who have never been successful in the private sector. People that have never signed the front of a paycheck, only sign the back of a paycheck. And finally, we need someone with courage to fight for all of you, to take on the special interest, and that's what I'm going to do as governor. I ask for your support.
Gentlemen and lady, thank you very much. We appreciate your time this evening. I would hearken back to a comment that one of the candidates, I believe Mr. McGill, made earlier in the evening when he talked about how well qualified each of these candidates that we've heard from tonight is. We thank you for volunteering yourselves for public service to serve in the highest office in South Carolina. The responsibility, the onus of responsibility is now in your hands on June 12th. We look forward to seeing the results, and we encourage you to make sure that you and your family and your friends all go to the polls on June 12th. Thank you very much for listening this evening. Good night.